That's what I would call. I never saw that coming.
We're gonna get started now at 3, and as people come in, we'll accommodate for them. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for coming to this talk. I know I'm very excited to present to you some of the concepts around the economics of Lync. My name is Luis Morinigo. I work for New Signature. This is my colleague, John Johnson, JJ. He also works for New Signature in a different capacity, but I have been with New Signature for approximately 2 years. I work in a strategy consulting arm of the firm. My background is in finance. I spent about 4.5 years in London with JP Morgan under the Equity Capital Markets group there. Prior to that, I received a master's at the London School of Economics and Operations Research, and proudly graduated from the University of Maryland with a dual degree in math and economics. So I was very excited to come back and change careers into technology, but not lose sight of everything that I did learn. So as part of my role, I've been asked several times to look at technology decisions from an economic perspective and try to think not only in terms of how much it costs, but also what are the potential benefits of a decision, and align those economics to the overall business drivers of an organization. So we lead with business, we lead with economics, and then we find the solutions that best fit that that scenario.
Unless you're talking about the government.
I understand that. And this actual presentation is specifically tailored to federal. So
Okay.
there are approaches that I've put together here that are specific to that. Before I get started, I would like to say that I'm not a Lync expert, nor am I a unified communications expert. We have plenty of resources at New Signature that are spent every day reading white papers and staying on top of all the technologies around unified communications. I can't speak to some of the elements here. I can speak to all of the line items that I've posted here. But if you do have more technical questions and how it relates to the cost elements of Lync, I'm happy to provide more information based on the expertise of my colleagues. Okay. So, as you can see, I've got an agenda put together. Some of the boxes here have been shaded out because I'm going to start talking about the overview of the total economic impact of Lync, what it means, how it fits into the federal space, and then I'll talk a little bit more about the approach. Why is this approach important? How do we tailor it to a specific analysis? And then I will look to highlight some of the federal requirements for unified communications, and then tie that into an example of how to derive the costs and benefits based on these specific requirements using this model. So the purpose of today is not to necessarily define all of the assumptions and say, hold on a second, that doesn't really work for my group, or my organization thinks about it this way. The purpose is to think about it in terms of a framework. And this framework is flexible and robust. So as you do your analysis, as you capture your business requirements, you can incorporate actual metrics that allow you to derive these benefits and costs. The other thing I want to say about this is that this approach is not unique to Lync. We approach all of our business decisions with this in mind. So when we're looking at Office 365, we've done a lot of those types of assessments. And we leverage what Forrester has done in their fantastic research and their white papers to then tweak the analysis to what is important to us. Forrester provides the overall framework, and then we take it a step further, and we define the business processes, we define what's important to an organization, and then we generate the benefits and costs associated with that particular case to the overall model. I'm going to talk a little bit about risk adjustments, net benefits, ROI. This is where sort of the finance comes into play. A lot of times when we're dealing with technology, we're like, oh, we don't want to deal with the financial side. We don't understand what net benefits really means because we work for the federal space, we don't have revenue. But if you associate the benefits to in a way that will allow you to understand the net benefits for your organization, I challenge you to think about it that way, and that's what I'm going to do here. Our ROI is a return on investment. So if I have to spend X amount of dollars in year one, what is my return after year three? So payback period, internal rate of return. So the internal rate of return just means if I were to invest my money in a bank, and then I get a 10% return on that, how much return am I getting from the project? So should I be investing that money in a bank, or should I be investing it in a project? These are concepts that may or may not apply to some special cases, but overall, I'll show you how to generate all that. Payback period, how long? That's a general project management approach to understanding when will I receive parts of my investment bank. Is it going to investment bank, not investment bank? Is it going to be in the first year? Is it going to be second year? In terms of months, is it going to be 12 months, 13 months, 14 months? It all allows you to make that decision and really come up with a comprehensive view of assessing an investment decision in a technology. So you're looking at your business requirements, you're looking at your budget, you're looking at the potential benefits, you're looking at qualitative inputs that you may want to take into account along with your technical requirements. So this gives you sort of the end piece to all of that. And then finally, I'm going to talk about how can you customize this economic model to meet your needs. So, how many of you have actually read or have heard of the Forrester's Total Economic Impact white paper or approach? Okay, great. So what Forrester did, or continues to do on a year-to-year basis for a lot of different workloads, is that they go out and they assess around 5 to 10 companies where they go in and they do stakeholder interviews and map out the business processes. In addition to that, they send out about 7 to 15 surveys to large companies, in this case, around 5,000 to 10,000, and they come up with a composite organization. This composite organization has the most complex entities of all of the responses that they were able to capture from the stakeholder interviews and the surveys. And what they found out was, so in this case, what they came up with as a composite organization is an Asian headquartered mining company with a global presence of 4,000 total users. That's not what I'm going to walk you through today. I actually created a composite organization for the federal space, but I wanted to just show you that this is the end result of what a TEI assessment looks like from Forrester's perspective. So initial pain points for Lync. A company that is looking to move to Lync is for unified communications is the collaboration communication. The TCO is too high, and they need better ways of collaborating. The mix of solutions is very confusing. They're using a solution for web conferencing. They're using a solution for phone. They're using a solution for instant messaging. They're using a solution for calendaring. They're using all these different solutions that don't speak to each other, don't provide the best customer experience to their organization. And finally, they have to do significant upgrade costs every so often. So these are the pain points that were identified by these companies that Forrester analyzed. And then they put this all through this magic total economic indicator, and they came out with 6.86 million in benefits and 3.58 million in costs. Now you might say, well, benefits, what does that really mean? I'll get to that as we go through the actual when I derived those actual benefits in the model. The ROI 79%, IRR is pretty high. The net present value is basically the idea of this benefit minus this cost gives you a number, right? And so what is that number in terms of if I'm receiving that number in 3 years from now, what is the value of that number today? These are finance concepts that are important, but that's not really the focus of today's talk. We can derive these numbers, we can provide the payback to our project management team, but at the end of the day, I want to show that this is a robust model that can allow you to break these numbers down if need be. If all you need is to understand benefits minus cost, great. That's what it does. Finally, we noticed that these organizations, after incorporating Lync 2013 on-premises for unified communications, gives you great internal and external collaboration. User productivity improves significantly, better support for mobile workers, and better system for reliability and performance. So I'm not going to get too into this slide. I just wanted to show you the breakdown of the benefits and the cost. You notice that staffing optimization was at 3.9 million. That basically means if your staff can be invested, if time has been freed up and your staff no longer has to do X function, they can be allocated to another function, which allows you to save about 3.9 million, among other things. Contracting costs are also reduced, and that's what's taken into account here. But those are details that live behind this number. I just wanted to show that in this case, internal labor and various software licenses were the big ones here. But every single organization, every single unit, every single group is different, and so every time that you do a total economic assessment, you're going to get different results. But it's important to understand how these numbers are derived and what makes up these numbers. So, what are examples of unified communications integrated capabilities? These are some of them. We want basically an integrated, we want to achieve productivity from an integrated solution that incorporates many of these capabilities. And that's sort of what we're looking at right now. Okay, so I should have made this a little darker, but now we're at approach. We've talked about the overview. I've talked about the TEI model, what it means, how, at a high level, how benefits and costs are derived, and what it means in terms of unified communications. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the approach. I've said several times that this is a framework, and that this framework should be adjusted to your unique business case or investment decision. So you'll notice that we have 4 chevrons here. The first one, perform due diligence. That's really understanding what is the lay of the land. What is the overall comprehensive inventory of all my costs? How do different business processes interact with each other? What are some of the areas that I need to highlight and understand from a process perspective and say, there might be a cost savings in this space, or there might not be. So that's what you do first. The second thing you do is you go out and you identify the stakeholders, you understand, you set up interviews, and you capture documentation that they may provide. And so all of that is this phase. And then once you have this information and this background, you can start building your TEI model. So this is, what assumptions do I want to make? What costs do I want to incorporate? What benefits do I want to incorporate? So if you don't understand, if you may come to a point where you say, I know that Lync can give me the benefit of collaboration, but is that something I really want to derive? That seems very daunting, and it doesn't necessarily match my business objectives, because it's kind of like a soft benefit. And so you can choose not to incorporate that, but you can take that into account as part of the qualitative assessment. What you do want to understand is the costs, and what are some of the cost reductions that you may have, which you can interpret as a benefit itself. And then finally, you create a roadmap and you create a case study that supports this. So we all know that the decisions made by just economics in a silo is not necessarily the best solution. So this is just, as I said earlier, a piece of the puzzle, and it matches all of the other requirements in your assessment process that you need to take into account. And one other thing is that if you present this, if you're talking at a CIO level, the CIO is mostly going to understand, or is mostly going to be interested in sort of this part. So what processes do we have in place? who's responsible for managing these processes, what technologies do we have supporting those processes, and the CFO is going to start looking at this. And so you're approaching the problem and expanding the audience that is part of the decision-making group. Okay, now we're going to briefly talk about some of the federal requirements for UC. So I've just put some examples of some of the business requirements when it comes to unified communications for the federal government. We've got everything from service delivery, telework, situational awareness, which is where are people, and emergency response. We need to act on something right away. Operational readiness, we're ready to respond at any moment. In this case, in this analysis, I'm going to focus on cost. All of these factors are important, but to be able to derive the benefits from all of these situations for a composite organization is a big task. So obviously, the more information you know about an organization, the more you know about how your group operates, the easier it may be to start deriving some of these assumptions. But today we're going to focus on cost, and that means cost reduction and also the cost of implementation, the cost of professional services, and other costs that I will get into in later slides. So some of the reasons I just highlighted here as well, the reasons that companies have been looking for a solution are very similar to the federal space. So you've got improved mobility. People are starting to work remotely. You've got an interest in lower total cost of ownership, and the life cycle replacement costs won't go away. They'll continue to come every 3-4 years. So how does one adapt to that? How do you deal with that specific cost? I might be going a little fast, but it's just I've got a lot of slides and I want to get to the interesting part of the model here. So for this particular model that I've built, I've leveraged what Forrester put together, and I tweaked it so that we could start talking about it in terms of the federal. So we have one headquarter office. We've got 2 satellite offices. We've got approximately 5,000 users. 70% of them will go with headsets, and 30% will go with IP desk phones. We want something that is highly available. This is important because this is going to increase cost. We want to leverage the Link CAL on top of the enterprise CAL that this organization has, and we have a PBX lifecycle upgrade that's coming up in the near future that we need to tackle. So these are sort of the high-level assumptions that we have. Okay, so what are the benefits and what are the costs? Forrester looked at 3 particular benefits. They looked at the benefit of eliminating the PBX and web conferencing costs. They looked at staff optimization, and they looked at telephony. We're not going to focus on telephony because I'm assuming we're not making too many international calls for the sake of this model. So I talked about soft benefits before. The soft benefits are general increase in user productivity and team efficiency. So that means the ability to work from home and call your colleague and then call another colleague and work together on a project from a remote location. That right now is important, but we're not deriving that. We can derive it. Forrester has done a very good job of coming up with a process of deriving it. We at New Signature, we generally do derive soft benefits. We call them out and we highlight them and we say these are all the assumptions that we've put together, and this is why it matches your organization. And we have a incredibly comprehensive spreadsheet that just captures all of this and generates these numbers. The other thing is flexibility. So flexibility is an interesting one as well, because what it does is the way that Forrester defines flexibility is the ability to take advantage of an opportunity provided by the technology in the future that you may not want to take today, but it's there. You've made the investment, or you may have to make the investment because you've already taken that first step to making that investment. The opportunity could be reached in the future, and I'll get into that as well. This is where we start to get into some um, concepts that are not necessarily as tangible as these ones, but they're still important, and we do need to make sense of them. The costs. So the cost areas here are implementation, labor, professional costs, hardware costs, software license costs, and additional bandwidth. Because remember, we're going to Link, and we want to be able to have that voice capability. So we want additional bandwidth to make sure that we are we're reaching the the highest requirement levels there.
Can you help me understand the difference between implementation, labor, and professional costs?
Sure. So implementation labor makes the assumption that the implementation is done with a ratio of this many people from our internal group is going to be responsible, along with maybe 20% of contractors. So depending on the organization, some of a 30-70 breakdown, some of a 50-50, some are all doing it with professional services. So that's really the difference, is that this is internal, this is external.
Oh, okay, got it, thank you. Yeah.
And this also includes the training.
Okay.
So now we're going to start deriving the TEI benefits and costs based on this composite organization. Okay, a lot of numbers here, and don't mean to scare you with all of this reference, but again, when you're dealing with a very large spreadsheet, this is a very simplified version of how to derive these numbers. It's very important to always have a reference to all of the metrics, so that you can look at a number and say, okay, that's just the calculation of these three metrics. And then we've got other factors like risk adjustment and the total, which is the total after you adjusted for risk. So what's risk? I'll get to that just in a second. But essentially what we have here is we have three metrics. We have the one-time upgrade costs, we have the reduced annual maintenance, and we have a PBX, and then we have the eliminated web conferencing solution. So that's in terms of the licensing. So right now you'll notice that we eliminate this cost, but we have two other offices. The two other offices are roughly the same size, and we do those in year 2 and year 3. Right? So that takes care of all of the upgrade costs. The reduced maintenance is about $50,000 a year here. Again, we're not too concerned with what these numbers actually are, because I'm sure that we actually have more. Each of you has more specific numbers for these metrics if we were to do an analysis. The eliminated web conferencing solution is, as you can see here, $100,000, and then over time, users were taken off the system. So you see a staggered $150,000, $200,000. So that means that in benefits, you have this gain: $200,000, $150,000, $400,000, $450,000. This is an example of how cost reduction is interpreted as a benefit. This is the way that Forrester does this. If you were to estimate soft costs, it would be very similar, but you would have to break these down into what the metrics of that soft cost was. The risk adjustment is basically, okay, I'm pretty confident that these are all of the costs that I'm going to save on, but what Forrester does here is they say, over a analysis of these different companies, you're probably going to see some of them not reach the level of cost reduction that's expected, and that risk is a 10% risk. So now you're adjusting what you think is the best case scenario with the actual 10% here, and you're reducing the benefit based on that. So now we're going to go to benefit 2, staff optimization. A couple things here that are assumptions. The local admins were basically, so you've got C1 here, the communications positions were either removed or you did not add any more positions to support that. So that would be this number right here. The annual fully burdened cost is basically the annual cost of these administrators, and then the IT support desk removed. So basically what happens is you're assuming, and this is, again, a Forrester approach, and tweak some of the numbers based on some of the information that I researched, but ideally that these numbers, again, would come from your specific case. But as you as Lync is implemented, there is no longer a need for an administrator in Office 1, Office 2, Office 3, and there's a reduced need for the support groups in those areas. And so what this means is that this position is removed. It just means that these resources can start doing other work. So you freed their time to be able to work on other projects. And the reduced headcount here is about the total of these numbers. So it's 3 times 130, 4 times 95. You sum those up. Again, you add a risk adjustment here of 10%. And let's say that you as an organization don't feel very confident with these estimates. You put that number at 35%. Right? But you build a scale that's consistent, because you can't say this is 35%, I'm not confident with that. And in the previous cost, you're saying, I'm not confident with this number, it's a 10%. Your scale has to be consistent across, because that will give you the story you need to tell. Okay, so in terms of total benefits, we've got about $4 million in benefits. And if you want to look at it from a present value perspective, that's $3.2 million today. Costs. Yes?
Do you find breaking out the voicemail maintenance be beneficial in that? So you have the maintenance of the regular PBX,
Yeah.
but a lot of people don't understand how much money actually goes into the maintenance of the voicemail system.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So that should be a separate line.
That should be a separate line. Yeah. For simplicity purposes, like.
Okay. Just wanted to call it out.
So internal implementation costs here. What you'll see is this is sort of implementing. This is related to implementing Lync. So you've got number of weeks. You've got total number of weeks. This isn't very unlike estimating projects and allocating resources to projects. You still have to allocate, for example, how much time a project takes, how many weeks it takes, how many resources you have. It's the same approach when you're dealing with building these metrics. So you go through and you do several rounds of reviews, and you look at these numbers. And what you'll do in here, we've got the proof of concept, number of weeks, the link setup, the geographic rollout between the two other offices, the number of weeks, the total number of weeks. So that's just the sum of these. The number of full-time employees required to make that happen, the cost per week per employee, and then the total internal implementation labor costs. And then you've got this concept of Lync ongoing support for full-time for the employees, and you need an FTE to do that. So you need 3 FTEs in year 1 all the way to year 3. You've got their annual fully burdened cost, and internal labor risk adjustment is 10%, and you calculate the total. Now you may ask, well, you reduced some costs for support in benefits. So why won't these just cancel out, right? You're just incorporating internal implementation costs again? Not necessarily, and that's why we do this. It may be that the implementation labor may be higher than the support costs from your original benefits assessment, but that's why we do. It depends on the technology that you're assessing. Okay, I've got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to kind of move a little quicker now that we understand the concepts of the metrics, the risk adjustments, and we're not too concerned with the actual numbers. But this is just basically professional costs, implementation services. That's Microsoft helping you out potentially as a partner, solution support, training, and then the total of that. So this is the contractor side of things. And then you've got the total risk adjustment there. Hardware costs. This is everything that goes into the setup of Lync from a hardware perspective. Everything from physical servers down to phones, soft phones, headphones, and then the total hardware costs here. And the risk adjustment, you'll notice, is 5%. The reason why it's 5% is because with a good amount of confidence, you can say that a physical server costs this much, a gateway costs this much, right? And you need this many because you've already architected the solution. So the risk adjustment is 5% as opposed to 10%. Software licensing costs. Again, you know what you need in terms of licensing, so your risk adjustment is going to be 0%. But you've got these list of licenses that you're going to purchase, and so 11 Windows servers, Windows Server Enterprise license, 3 Lync 2013 server licenses, and 3 SQL Server 2.4 licenses. You add those up, and you get that amount. So total costs are software licenses. This is actually not software licenses. That should be additional bandwidth, but the additional bandwidth would cost $150 per year. Total cost.
Question for you.
Yeah.
When you came up with the architecture prior screen, when you're talking about SQL servers, are we talking about a redundant system kind of thing? Is that what you had in mind when you did that?
Yeah.
So this is not a single.
That's what I was saying. Like the cost of that redundant system is higher. That's why it was one of the requirements at the beginning of the.
So redundancy is part of the architecture.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a good question.
So that was your high availability square that was on the original assumption.
Correct. And I said that it would affect costs, and that's where it affected it. So thank you for reminding me to bring that up. So I line up all the costs, I add them up, and you've got about $3.5 million in costs. So what does that mean? We start talking about risk adjustments and net benefits. I'll show you what that means in terms of net benefits. So now we do benefits minus cost. You'll see the first year we're down a bit, and that's because it's an investment, right? You're gonna invest in the infrastructure. You're gonna have some higher costs in that initial year. Before I get into that, I'm just gonna highlight these risk adjustments. For each risk adjustment that we made, we actually identified what that adjustment was, so that we can come back and just say, you know what, I think that we were mistaken with web conferencing costs. That should be 25% down. We did not do telephony costs because that's one of the assumptions I said at the beginning. We're not making too many international calls. So, but I did want to show that this is what Forrester would do. They would just line this up and incorporate these percentages. And in terms of the return on investment, you'll see it's 7%. It might seem a little low, but the reason is we're focusing on the number of benefits that we've highlighted have been due to cost reduction. The other soft benefits are not included. So this is at a sort of baseline level, at a minimum level, what you're going to see. For this particular example, return on investment is, the internal rate of return is pretty high, 34%, better than 10%, which is the assumed baseline that's discounted. And then the payback period is in 28 months. That means that you'll see a return on your money in 28 months after you've done this investment. So now comes the bigger question. How do I tailor the TI to fit the organization's unique requirements? So this is a framework, and it's a very robust framework. It allows you to estimate the metrics that are specific to what you need to see to make a decision. And so how do you do that? To perform due diligence, you have to get, again, the inventory of all your costs. You need to understand the the infrastructure of the current state as much as possible. Then with that knowledge, you go and you start conducting end user requirements, and that's based on these stakeholder interviews. You list out all their interviews and you start mapping them up and deriving benefits from them. So, for example, if a team cannot meet with each other because the cost of getting a WebEx meeting up and incorporating 2 or 3 people that are living on the other side of the country, those are the types of processes that would need to be taken into account. So the benefit would be a unified and centralized way of communicating across state lines and with different requirements, right? So being able to do it easily, being able to have it have this process integrated with the calendar function, all of these things would be mapped out. And so how much of that you want to derive is a decision, is a cost-benefit analysis, right? If you're going to invest all your resources in trying to derive all of these benefits, but the return on deriving those benefits is not that high, then it doesn't make much business sense to do that. So it's sort of like a way of balancing act here is how much do I want to derive that enough to help me make the decisions that I need to make. And then you construct the model based on the requirements here. So you start thinking about the assumptions. So if you take your mind back to that assumption of the number of days required or weeks required to do a proof of concept, the number of FTEs needed to support the system, the number of of individuals required to do training. Those are the types of assumptions that you would start to put together in here, and then deriving all of the other benefits and cost elements. And then you would build a roadmap, an action plan based on this financial summary that would tie into the overall assessment of a technology decision that you're taking into account. So I'm happy to send the spreadsheet that derived all of this to everybody. If you give me your card, I'm happy to send that over. And also, I'm happy to show you final real-world examples of some of the work that we've done with some of our clients as well that breaks all of this down from start to finish. I know I'm probably really close on time.
Would it be possible for you to give it to Microsoft so that we get it with the rest of the documents from today? That would be
Sure.
awesome.
Yeah, that's easier. We'll make that available. I know I went through a lot. There's a lot of different concepts here, so I do appreciate your time. Are there any questions?
What's the level of effort to do that analysis? How much time does it take? Approximate cost?
Depends on the project, but I would say that in a discovery project, if you have a 30-hour discovery project, it would be about 10 hours.
Of course, that's assuming you know where all your costs are.
Yeah.
Right. That's the problem for us.
Yeah.
At least for our
You know
agency.
what everything costs first.
Have you customized for service level agreements so you can estimate the next group of users,
That's
capacity, the licensing?
Yeah, all of that we took it. We've done that. The other thing I want to say is that it's not just getting all of the costs, but understanding what are the costs that have the highest impact. Because you could spend an eternity trying to find a list of all the costs, but in reality, all we need is 60% of those that say these are where the biggest impacts are going to be, and then we can make sense of that, and then this analysis sort of. Instead of trying to be a perfectionist and trying to get everything, now we're focused on the most important part, and we're getting that right, and we're making sense of that, and then we can confidently say, in this universe of costs that we have that are critical, that we've prioritized, this is our confidence level throughout the model. This is how we can present that. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the voicemail piece, but I think people underestimate how much we all are spending.
Yeah, I mean, I can, off the top of my head, I can tell you, Siemens high path voicemail for about 400 users, costs you 25 grand a month in maintenance. Just a quick number.
I have a question on that as well. What do you, in the exercise you've done for customers around maintenance and replacement, what's the biggest cost savings and what's the biggest surprise that you guys find yourself? What's being spent?
I think the biggest cost savings is sort of the initial PBX web conferencing savings that we see. And because we're focused on the baseline benefits, so not the soft benefits, we're seeing that return on investment at around the 7%, 5%, which doesn't seem that important, but it is because it's not taking into account what Lync sells itself as, right? It's just the baseline. These are the transition costs that are happening, and these are the benefits from that transition.
The other thing that makes it hard for us is that there's an assumption that we have the CapEx in our budget,
right?
And we don't,
yeah.
Right? So getting people to understand that from an ROI standpoint is that we don't have the money to begin with, right? And so we typically will just limp the system along at the bottom. But it would be easier for our capital planning that we actually had all this in there. We were projected to do it on this date because that money's in there. But that's not the case.
So how would it work then? If you chose a particular period of time, 5 years, starting now, then that would be what you would assess, not necessarily what has been invested in the past.
No, what I'm saying is that it's not in our budget to make that replacement or upgrade today. So it would be a zero out there. I mean, we know how much it would cost, but we'll just take the risk, and not do it.
Yeah.
And so we have to use then really the productivity stuff and the things that we do have, like on the long distance phone calls and maintenance, voicemail, all that carries a lot more weight. Than
understood.
We're not very good at capital planning because that's not how the government does budgeting.
Understood.
So the second part of the question, what's the biggest surprise that you guys run into? What's the thing that shocks you guys the most when you look at the numbers? Is there anything that really jumps out, like voicemail, maintenance, or?
I think that again, I don't build the architecture, but I think from an architecture perspective, it's that initial current state definition of how much does the current state cost. It's pretty difficult to work through. But all of the implementation costs can tend to be tricky as well. Project delays, how do you capture that, for example? Now you have to start tapping into your project management teams and saying, what do you think? How much will you value this much time lost, and is it reasonable? The other thing is sort of the thing that's also we have calculated training in here. The thing that's surprising is that tends to be pushed back towards like year 3 or year 4, and that has a big effect on the benefits. So all of the benefits of people using the system as it should sort of are not realized as one would expect. So if the training numbers start to come in earlier, you start to see that. And there's, what Forrester's done, or what some of these organizations have done based on the study, is that they say we're starting off in a slow kind of transition. So we're going to move 500 people here, then 1,000, then 200, and they just kind of manage it like that. So that manages that risk of, let's get early adopters, let's work through that, and then we'll see how that transitions without having to invest too much in training in the first line.
Any other questions? Thank you so very much for your presentation and time.
Thank you, everybody.
I think at this point we probably have a networking reception, ask the experts period. There are some cocktails and munchies that are out there, so if you guys want to ask some questions offline to our experts.